Workers all around the world are caught in informal jobs because they need to earn an income to feed themselves and their families and cannot rely on benefits paid by the state or their own private savings. According to the International Labour Organization in 2020, over 62% of the global workforce were doing informal jobs, such as street vendors, care workers, or off-the-books hired workers on construction sites. Most informal workers are freelancers, without a contract and typically lack access to social insurance, unions, or unemployment benefits. The informal economy is not a market in the shade that does not concern the functioning labor market. Millions of human beings across the world are trapped in low income and low productivity activities. Most of them will not be able to get a better life by themselves. The COVID-19 crisis has created additional pressures to rebuild the social pact in many regions. The rise in unemployment and informality shows that social protection systems did not reach vulnerable workers in most parts of the globe. In those countries where the state could not respond to mass layoffs or to further income loss of citizens threatened by poverty, the gap deepened and the impact of the pandemic hit even harder, for example, by failing to protect people's health. The global labor market therefore needs a structural transformation that addresses inclusion, fair working conditions, innovative approaches, and the quality of education. What approaches exist? Let's take a look at the African continent. It has a population of over 1.3 billion people, and it is the youngest continent. Sub-Saharan Africa is about 7 years younger than the next youngest region in the world. The continent struggles with informal work and has several initiatives to tackle it. What are those initiatives? In recent years, African governments have made significant efforts to develop a range of contributory social protection schemes, for example. They cover workers in the informal economy and include extension of legal and effective coverage for informal workers. They also digitalize and simplify administrative procedures. An example of extending social protection to the informal economy comes from the maternity leave, sick leave and death benefits (MSD) fund in Namibia, a short-term social insurance scheme administered by the Social Security Commission of Namibia. It benefits domestic workers as well as employees of small and medium-sized enterprises and their families in the case of unexpected income loss. Another way of tackling informality is the cooperation with trade unions. Ghana and Zimbabwe have led the way in organizing the informal economy with the support of their trade unions and own initiatives from within the sector itself. The informal economy is organized, but its organizations are usually not invited to sit around a table to negotiate. Trade unions in some sub-Saharan African countries are talking to workers' self-organizations by recruiting new members among the informal economy workers or by promoting dedicated informal economy trade unions. Other trade unions build alliances with informal economy associations and corporations, thus giving informal workers a voice rather than criminalizing them. What about skills obtained in the informal economy? They might not be recognized or form part of an official qualification, but they're real and often relevant. Also, informal workers contribute to the GDP. The Employment Service of Uganda, among others, profiles the informal skills of their job seekers and helps them market them to employers in the formal economy. This is one step towards expanding the scope for professionalization and formalization of informal businesses. Evidence from African industry representatives shows that employers are also willing to offer workplace exposure and technical learning opportunities for skilled but informal workers. Public employment services can play an important role in supporting transitions from the informal to the formal economy. They are a relay between skills and jobs, they have an outreach to the most vulnerable, and often public employment services are also an inspector role for the labor market, and therefore can unveil and combat exploitative employment practices. In order to be relevant in tackling informal work, public employment services need the leverage of active labor market programs. So what can public employment services concretely do to help reduce informal work? Obviously, they cannot solve structural issues like the basic country infrastructure or the educational system, but they can enforce and develop its tools to address informal work. Public employment services can use and build their network to raise awareness about the topic of informal work, instead of treating it as a taboo. It makes sense to involve informal workers or multipliers in the discussion and share practices that work well, regionally, nationally, and internationally. Often informal work occurs because there is a lack of information. Awareness-raising campaigns can help employers provide better working conditions, contracts, and put focus on inclusion and innovation. Public employment services can systematically and preferably with digital support assess the full spectrum of skills of the informal workers and help segment them according to their economic sector and activities for a target-oriented matching. The public employment services could further focus on promoting employability to improve the situation in the labor market in general and help reduce poverty. Support programs for business entrepreneurship can be effective, as can be specific skills trainings. Another powerful tool are early interventions to avoid informality before it happens, in cooperation with educational service providers and other stakeholders, school-to-work transitions programs, for example. To put it straight, informal employment is one of the most challenging features of labor markets today. Public employment services can be a significant help here, given their role and position, but they do need to be strengthened so that they can support social protection, employability, and the sharing of practices that work well in moving workers from the informal to the formal economy.